Hello, dear saints in Christ. Today I will be reading for you my essay on the Book of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, originally written on my Substack called The Orthodox Scribe. So in John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, we encounter a sad and beautiful story of two itinerant laborers, George Milton and Lenny Small, who cling to each other in a world that doesn't welcome weakness. The novella, first published in 1937, is concise and stark, yet its moral weight and emotional resonance are immense. Lenny, a large man with a childlike mind, is the center of the novella's moral conflict. He's gentle and affectionate, yet immensely strong and prone to unintended harm. He literally doesn't know his own strength. George, his protector and friend, shoulders the arduous task of keeping them both alive, dream intact, in a system designed to crush people like Lenny. Of Mice and Men isn't just a tragedy. It's also a parable of sin and mercy, of vocation and sacrifice, and of the haunting question, what does the world do with those who can't defend themselves? In Lenny, we may glimpse not only the vulnerability of our neighbors, but also the wounded Christ who bears our infirmities. And in George, we find not a flawless moral compass, but a man burdened with a fallen world's impossible choices. So now this is your spoiler warning. Proceed in this video at your own caution. So the novella's title is taken from the Scottish poet Robert Burns' 1785 poem called To a Mouse on Turning Her Up in Her Nest with the Plow. In it, Burns reflects on the sudden destruction of a field mouse's home by the blade of his plow and recognizes a shared fragility between mouse and man. This is what part of the poem says. And the wording is kind of strange, so bear with it. The best laid schemes of mice and men gang aft agilely, or agilely, I think that's what it is, and leave us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. The words are a plain-spoken reminder that even the most careful plans often go wrong. We can arrange everything with foresight and good intentions, but life's contingencies, chance, weakness, forces outside one's control, can overturn those plans and leave us with nothing but disappointment, or with grief and pain instead of the happiness we expected. Steinbeck doesn't merely borrow a poetic title. He signals his story's central tension that also happens to be indicative of Christian theology, that in a fallen world, even the most innocent hopes and tender intentions are susceptible to destruction, grief, and unintended consequences. In the opening pages of the novella, George and Lenny's dream of living off the fat of the land becomes a recurring refrain, a liturgy of hope against the backdrop of economic ruin, specifically the Great Depression, social exclusion, and a fragile mental health. Their plan is modest, good, and rooted in mutual care, but it's destroyed, not by malice, but by misunderstanding, fear, and the cruel weight of an unmerciful world. This is rather indicative of what St. Paul writes in Romans 7:19, for the good that I will to do, I do not, but the evil I will not to do, that I practice. Now, George and Lenny don't fail because they're wicked. Their plans fail because they're human. They're susceptible to fear, to accident, and to the weight of a society that offers no grace to the weak. From a theological standpoint, the title Of Mice and Men also reminds us that God alone makes plans that do not fail. As David proclaims in Psalm 33, the counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. In contrast to human schemes, the gospel is the promise that will not collapse, even when every worldly hope crumbles. George and Lenny's dream may perish in a barn, but the Christian hope, secured in the death and resurrection of Christ, endures through every heartbreak. The tragedy of Steinbeck's story isn't that plans go wrong, it's that they go wrong despite the purity of desire and goodness of heart. In this, the novella becomes not merely a cautionary tale, but a lament. And lament in the scriptures isn't the absence of faith, it's the voice of those who still believe God hears. Now, although Steinbeck never diagnoses Lenny, some readers, including yours truly, recognize in him some characteristics commonly associated with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD for short, which yours truly also has. He exhibits a limited ability to process social cues, repetitive behaviors such as his petting soft things, anxiety in response to change or unfamiliar situations, and a deep emotional dependence on routine and reassurance. Now, George describes Lenny's mind early in the book with the words, "He's just like a kid." Now, George's words capture both Lenny's cognitive limitations and one of the many stereotypes of autistic individuals being childish. As a psychologist and autism expert observes, and this is from the book Unmasking Autism, The Power of Embracing Our Hidden Neurodiversity by Dr. Devin Price. Price writes, "Being too passionate about a video game, comic book, or wild animal species, and other things, is often viewed in society as childish or limited, and so autistic children, and I would add adults, are expected to hide their enthusiasm. Interestingly, adults are only shamed for having an obsessive interest if that interest is a bit too strange and doesn't come with the opportunity to rack up a lot of achievements or make a lot of money." End quote. Now, to be clear, autism is not a sin nor a flaw to be pitied. Lenny, whether autistic or not, that's open to debate. Lenny is a person who challenges our culture's idolatry of competence, speed, and independence. Our culture has long measured worth by one's level of productivity. Lenny thus reminds us that human worth isn't based on utility. Now, I still, even though I'm Orthodox catechumen now, I still appreciate Luther's short explanation of what in Lutheranism is the fifth commandment, "You shall not murder," in a small catechism. He says, "We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need." In other words, we're called not simply to refrain from violence, but also to actively protect the vulnerable. Lenny exists in a world where almost no one does that. And as an autistic person myself, I've experienced firsthand discrimination against my disability, even in the church. Now, Steinbeck's 1930s California isn't overtly religious, but it is soaked in the law. Not God's perfect law, but the harsh utilitarian law of economic survival. The meek do not inherit the earth under this system. They're exploited, discarded, or killed. Curly's wife in the novel, herself marginalized and unnamed, recognizes Lenny's difference immediately. She says, "He ain't mean. I can tell a mean guy from a mile off." Her words are tragically true. Lenny isn't cruel. He's rather incapable of guile. Yet the world sees only the danger of his difference and arguably neurodivergence, not the meekness of his intent. When he accidentally kills her, panicked, confused, and terrified, he becomes a hunted animal. His death isn't due to justice, but fear. Something else I appreciate about Lutheranism is Lutheran theology will speak of the Deus absconditus, which means the hidden God. In Lenny's story, we encounter this theological mystery. God seems absent in the moment of crisis. The world's judgment falls quickly. There's no trial, appeal, or intercession. For the Christian, God is never more present than in the suffering of the innocent. Jesus, too, was misunderstood, condemned without cause, and crucified as a threat to the social order, both Jewish and Roman. And Luther, he writes this in his Heidelberg Disputation: the visible and manifest things of God are seen through suffering and the cross. And I think we Orthodox can certainly agree with that. We find God not in power, although he does actually reveal himself in power, but he does not fully reveal himself in power, but in affliction and suffering in the passion of Christ, right? Lenny is one of these. In his death, we're not meant to condemn, but to grieve. And now the climax of the novel, George's decision to shoot Lenny himself before the mob arrives, is one of the most heart-wrenching moments in American literature. George sits beside Lenny, asking him to imagine their dream one last time. The promised land, the rabbits, the fat of the land, the freedom. Then he shoots him in the back of the head. It's a mercy killing. There's no such thing. It's an execution. An act of love, really an act of desperation. It cannot be justified and it cannot be dismissed. Now, I still can't help but draw from my Lutheran background to speak on this, and I think it can even be rightly understood through an Orthodox lens of, Lutherans believe in vocation amid brokenness, that Christians are called to serve their neighbor even when no perfect solution exists, even when it's extremely difficult. Now, George's act is not righteous. Nonetheless, it is born of love in a fallen world, a world where the systems of protection have failed, where the law is ruthless, and where grace must sometimes appear as grief. George genuinely believed he was doing this for the good of Lenny, but murder is never the solution to misunderstanding or inconvenience. I think this exhibits quite well Luther's his phrase, simul justus et peccator, simultaneously saint and sinner, which I think we Orthodox can also agree with. George, in this moment, perfectly embodies that paradox. He bears the cross and enacts death because he refuses to let the mob do it. But he still pulls the trigger, right? Now, I don't think he can be viewed as a villain or a hero in this moment. He's both at the same time. So rather, he should be seen as a man crushed by the weight of a sin-sick world. The George and Lenny's dream to live off the fat of the land, to own a small farm, to be safe and free, is more than economic. It's a longing for freedom, or for Eden, for home, peace, and security in a world that can't promise such perennial stability. This is why their dream is repeated like a liturgy. And have rabbits. Go on, George. Tell about what we're going to have in the garden. That's what Lenny says, often. Now, Lenny's litany isn't delusional. It's eschatological hope. It's the language of a childlike soul yearning for the kingdom of God, to which children belong. As Christ himself says, assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. As Christians, we know this hope won't be fulfilled by political systems or economic freedom, yet the desire itself is holy. A promise of a home, of work with dignity, and of bodies and minds healed is precisely what Christ has secured for his people. As 2 Peter 3, verse 13 says, nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Now, Lenny dies before that promise is fulfilled, but he dies believing it. Now, Lenny isn't a Christ figure in the traditional literary sense. He doesn't save others, and he's not sacrificed for anyone's survival. But for the Christian, he is someone in whom Christ suffers. He's a man despised and rejected, slow of speech, gentle of hand, who harms no one on purpose, and is destroyed for what he cannot help. In the way society treats Lenny, we see the truth of Jesus' words, inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. So Of Mice and Men, it's one of my favorite books, and it isn't a comforting book, but it is a cruciform one. It holds up a mirror to our fallen world and asks, who is your neighbor? It forces us to confront our response to those who don't fit in, like the autistic, who need care, and who frighten us by being different or neurodivergent. It reminds us that Jesus didn't come as the strong, the competent, or the admired. He came as a man acquainted with grief, a friend to sinners, and a brother to the broken. And he died for Lenny, too. Don't follow me, follow Jesus instead.